Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Yellow Sky from 1948, and this is continuing my quest to review as much of William Wellman's filmography as I possibly can. A group of 7 bandits, which include Gregory Peck and Richard Widmark. After robbing a bank, they run off into the desert, and the local sheriff in town who's chasing them gives up, shoots one of their men, so there's only 6 of them. They go through the desert, and after trudging along for several days without much water and without any food but all the money they got from robbing the bank, they just keep going because they know if they go the other way, the sheriff will come after them and there'll be a gunfight, and they probably won't win because there's a lot more of those guys. So they keep going, and they eventually find a ghost town called Yellow Sky. There they find a grandpa and his young granddaughter who are living there, and they get some water and food and slowly kind of figure out why are these two there, and realize that he is an old prospector who has lots of gold, and they slowly pick at each other and fight over the greed of this gold and the girl that's there in this ghost town. This film is, obviously directed by William Wellman, but it's also produced and written by the same guy who produced and wrote The Oxbow Incident, Lamar Trotty, and it actually has kind of some similarities to The Oxbow Incident, but it's also, I think, a very different film and a different kind of turn to what was going on in westerns, really. Although this film was based on a book by W.R. Burnett. At the beginning of the film, the saloon they walk in actually looks a lot like in the town that's not the ghost town, the town they eventually robbed the bank of. When they come into that town, the saloon they walk in looks almost identically to the Oxbow Incident saloon. I wouldn't be surprised if they used the same set. Almost makes me think like maybe this was done in the same universe as that, maybe just in a later time period. I'm not sure how true that is. I mean, it's kind of a crazy theory I made up. But then when they come into the bar, they all remark on the painting that's up in the bar, and they all talk about the woman in the painting, much like what happened at the beginning of the Oxbow Incident. In fact, the saloon inside looks exactly the same as the one in the Oxbow Incident, except it has a different painting over the bar. These scenes are very similar. It makes me wonder, why do that exactly? And so soon after, I mean, this is the same decade pretty much as the Oxbow Incident. I'm not really sure what would be the motivation in doing that. It's interesting. Wellman has a very pessimistic attitude about humanity, and I think this film definitely shows that, but it also kind of goes against one of Wellman's biggest trademarks as a director, which is male-male friendships and a group of men being together. That friendship kind of gets them through. And in this film, they're all pretty much antagonists. A few of them believe in the leadership of Gregory Peck, who's the leader of the bandits. Richard Widmark is almost the villain of the piece, although I guess you could say Gregory Peck is too. But Richard Widmark is really always picking at Gregory Peck and opposing him, and they're not really friends in the same way you're used to in like kind of regular Wellman protagonists. Gregory Peck really is regular Wellman protagonist, but Wellman himself was always more of a loner. Although he liked to talk about and use the experiences in World War I throughout his various films, even if he didn't write them, they're definitely there, and he has the 2 friends who really mean a lot to each other, who they represent something, they have a code of morals, basically, even if they are a criminal or what have you. Gregory Peck has that, the rest of the guys don't. In some ways it is very Wellman, in some ways it's very anti-Wellman, and it's also very moody and expressionistic. The cinematography by Joseph McDonald is very stunning, especially towards the end at the end gunfights they have. The things they leave out leave so much to the imagination while still giving the frightening images that you need from the scene in a very smart way. I'm sure you had the code at the time, and like Wellman seemed to know how to use that while still giving you haunting imagery. Wellman's really good with a good cinematographer. He seems to work with these guys. I couldn't find any information about him and Joseph McDonald ever working together ever again, which is unfortunate. Yellow Sky has this kind of moody feel about it that you would see later from people like Anthony Mann. He was a B-Western director when he started. None of those have survived, unfortunately. At this time, I guess his other 2 Westerns, The Oxbow Incident and The Robin Hood of El Dorado, are really more about social issues. Yellow Sky does remind me of kind of like a 50s or 60s Western, a moodier Western, a Western that was reflecting more of the time that was going on. And this is fairly early. Wellman was usually a little too ahead of his time in terms of his Westerns, especially with this and the Oxbow Incident. Him and Lamar Trotty were coming into issues just far too early. This is supposed to reflect kind of Reconstruction and what was going on post-Civil War, as a lot of Westerns did, especially in the 60s and then when you got into spaghetti Westerns. One of the things I always liked about the Western genre is you could basically do some like really interesting, deep, and dark character pieces and just have a couple gunfights and I guess everyone would be happy. I don't think you could do that as much in a modern action movie, and especially with The Yellow Sky, as moody, kind of dark as it is. Joseph McDonald also shot another kind of moodily shot and very dark Western, which was My Darling Clementine for John Ford. This is kind of the most John Ford Wellman film I've ever seen in terms of how he uses kind of Death Valley and how he uses the locations to kind of say something about the characters and what's going on. Like the Oxbow Incident, this takes place in pretty much one area, although it wasn't really a set, they actually went on a location, but he really uses that area, and you know, it never gets boring, it never gets dull. They're not really reusing shots ever. They're always finding new ways to do everything. Let's go between this rock, let's have them go through here, let's shoot it this way, let's have it be at night and you can't see what's going on almost. That was very much Wellman. Wellman liked to not show you things, and I think in this, him and Joseph McDonald did it in such a creative way that adds to the style and the mood of it. This is very much a stylized Western without being overly stylized, so it wouldn't upset the kind of modern, or at least the 1940s audience member who liked Westerns. You can like this Western and hail its artistry, but you can also like this Western and just go, oh hey, that was a cool Western picture. And I think that's kind of part of the genius of Yellow Sky. If you look at Lamar Trotty and Wellman's other film, The Oxbow Incident, that was a lot more subversive. I think this film is like secretly subversive. It was influenced very much by William Shakespeare's The Tempest. I'd say influenced because it's not like a remake or a different kind of a version. You can tell it's definitely there. Gregory Peck, I think he's most known because of To Kill a Mockingbird. Gregory Peck's always an actor who felt like he had a sense of morals about him, and he had a strong stoicness about him. And I think that really works for Wellman. And Richard Widmark really plays against that. He is very much a scoundrel, and he kind of has, and you know, maybe this is a bit too far, but I think he kind of has a bit of what Cagney had in Public Enemy. A bit, not as much. I always like Richard Widmark, and Richard Widmark and the cinematographer Joseph McDonald would actually work together later on Pickup on South Street. When I was starting to really get into Wellman, this was one of the first films I saw, I think after Public Enemy and things, and I was just like, whoa, I did not expect that. And especially during its era and how moody and kind of, it's almost a little arty in a way, you know. Wellman, for being such a no-nonsense Wild Bill Wellman, was a lot artier and more experimental than I think he gets a lot of credit for sometimes. Especially this is much later in his career than you'd expect him to do things like that. And it's not like his documentary style like he's doing in the war pictures he made in the 40s. It's really more like stark and moody and like kind of like this feeling almost that the movie The Misfits had, of like they're in purgatory almost, but not dwelling on it. It doesn't dwell on its artistic themes. It's just trying to be a genre Western about these guys trying to get this gold and have some gunfights and things like that. But it also gets to be moody at the same time, and it gets to show, you know, a desperation of man. It's one of those Westerns that if you like a moodier, artier, stranger Western, but that can still adhere to the genre in a lot of ways, I think Yellow Sky is almost perfect for that. I think it shows both that he's a studio director and he was a lot more than that at the same time, but he could deliver the goods, and that's why he was one of the top directors for so long, is because unfortunately I can't find any quotes about him, his work with Trotty, interestingly enough, and his work on Yellow Sky, so I don't know how he felt about it, but I've always felt this is one of his better pictures and definitely maybe my favorite Western of his, but I haven't seen Track of the Cat yet. I like seeing directors work within a genre sometimes. You know, I think Wellman did a lot of making the Western his own in The Robin Hood of El Dorado and The Oxbow Incident, and it's interesting to note the saloon in the first town is actually called the El Dorado. He wasn't really a genre Western director, but he seemed to know how to work within that genre and still get what he wanted done at the same time. And I think this is kind of an example of director at the time, because you're basically hired by a studio. Everyone was a studio director, no one was really independent, and he was kind of crashing those gates being an independent director before like a United Artists would come in the 50s, and there's more of an independent mindset that was going throughout Hollywood, but he could still do that while making the bosses happy and giving them a hit Western that, you know, people could see on a Saturday night. And that to me is like this is one of those films that really displays the real genius of William Wellman. Wellman, but it's also a hell of an entertaining picture and a hell of a good picture as well. So if you have seen Yellow Sky and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. So next up in my William Wellman series will be This Man's Navy, and thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you then. Okay.